Hello, I'm Hannah, evolutionary astrologer, and in today's video, I want to bring together two of my favorite subjects. One is, of course, astrology, and the second one that I want to bridge with astrology is art. I love, 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 love art. I've studied art. And one of the things that I really enjoy, every time I get to see a new painting or I get to look at the chart of an artist and understand, what was going on, because art is so deeply connected to the social context of the time. Because it's really reflecting to us, it's acting like a mirror. It's reflecting, the values of the times, the belief systems, the struggles, the innovations. So it's that mirror that, show us what was the political, social, cultural, economical context of the times. So by understanding art, we really understand our history, as humans, those who came before us, and also, where we are now and where we're going. So it's very much like astrology, we can, take this trip on, to the past and to the future. So in this video, I really want to focus on the birth of Impressionism that happened during the last time that Neptune was transiting the sign of Aries. And Neptune is about to enter Aries again. And that's a 165-year cycle around the zodiac. So it's Neptune is going to be entering a new sign, and Neptune is going to be starting a brand new 165-year cycle. So this is a really big deal. And another thing is that this is actually the very first time we're going to see Neptune in Aries since last time, which was the birth of Impressionism. So, I really want to focus here on the artistic side of Neptune and the artistic aspect of Neptune's. But if you want to hear more about this transit, more of a general overview, because there's so many themes, there's so much to unpack and talk about. So if you're interested in that, please check out my other video called Neptune, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, because then, I get to explain a little bit more about, different facets of this, not just the arts. But going back to the arts, going back to the artistic aspect of Neptune, the reason why, this is a planet that is related to the arts, and when I say arts, I'm really talking about in general, is because Neptune dissolves the material world's boundaries. All the limits of, what we think reality is, what we perceive as existing and existence. Neptune help us to really access these otherworldly realms and really tap into these realms and really tap into something that's much, much bigger than just of us in our daily lives. And then from that cosmic um, energies, these cosmic forces, right, we can draw inspiration from. We can really channel something that is really beyond, beyond, beyond. So, being an Aries, it's the first sign of the zodiac. It's that fresh new start. It's brand new. It's something that we haven't seen before. So again, if we go back to last time, this was the birth of Impressionism. The last time Neptune was in Aries was from 1861 to 1875. And, this is, when we talk about Impressionism, it's one of those art, those periods in art history that everyone has heard about, even if you don't know anything about art or don't even like going to museums. Like, you've heard of Impressionism, you've seen, Monet's famous water lilies. You've heard of names like Monet, Degas, Renoir, and that's because Impressionism was one of the most, if not the most, revolutionary movement in the history of art. It was a huge, huge game changer. So, I couldn't even pick just one cover for this presentation because there's so many beautiful ones. And like, for example, this one is, you see nature. It's so pleasant, it's so soothing, it's so lovely, right? And my second option is, of course, Monet's water lilies. And again, it's nature. You see the pastel colors and the water and the light, and it's just so pleasing. It's so soothing. So our minds might not take us, automatically take us to Aries. Because Aries, when we think of Aries, it's like, especially the colors of Aries are going to be reds and oranges and yellows. It's like the vibrant, bold colors. And here we don't necessarily see that right away. So when I'm saying that Impressionism was such a revolutionary movement in the history of art, our minds might not automatically see this reflected in the paintings, but it truly, truly was. And I'm going to tell you why. First of all, it was this dramatic shift in the way art was created, the way art was perceived, and the way art was valued, which is very, very much a reflection of the energy of Aries. Aries is newness. It's a new beginning. It's pioneering. It's something fresh. It's something that has not been done before, something very different from what came before. So in this case with Impressionism, another reason, a big reason why it was so revolutionary and pioneering and different had so much to do with the French Academy. So the French Academy was very much like the Saturn of the times. It was the Saturn of the art world. So, they dictated all the rules. What was good art? What wasn't? The proper art styles. What was in, what was out. And they were really very rigid, very restrictive, and very conservative. So they did not like, they are not receptive of the Impressionist painters. They held this like the greatest annual art event of the Western world called the Paris Salon. And pretty much none of the Impressionist paintings got in. And the very few ones that got in were very poorly placed. So, you know, but then you see these like really these group of rebels, these artists, all born, all of the Impressionist artists were born with Neptune in Aquarius. The previous two, cycle of Neptune and Aquarius. So Aquarius is about, this unification of minds, each mind bringing their own uniqueness, their own creativity. And these minds, these artists coming together and creating this new wave of originality and really genius and really progressive people, progressive minds. So I want to show you an example of Monet, Monet's chart. You see with he was born with Neptune in Aquarius right here. Where's my cursor? There you go. He was born with this Neptune in Aquarius. And so that was, all of the Impressionist painters were under the same cycle. So they came together to form this new movement, these souls that came in at a similar time to really, create a new artistic movement. And they also had Pluto in Aries. So Pluto in Aries really showing that initial rejection, really starting out in this place of being the ugly ducklings type of thing, their art, their creativity, and their genius not really being valued by the established, the artistic establishment of the times. But Aries is, this Pluto and Aries here really bringing that pioneering, transformative energy and really transforming the system of the times. So when Neptune entered Aries, last time this happened, this was their green light. It was that, you know, that that green light saying, all right, it's time, go, create, move forward, take action. So that's what they did. They really broke away from traditions. They gave birth to something brand new. And what was so amazing about, those painters, those impressionist painters and artists, is that they did not give up on their vision. They forged their path. That's the Aries energy. They had the courage and they took the risks, and they did not allow themselves to be limited by others' points of view. Regardless of the rejection by the establishment. And what they did, which was completely original and revolutionary at the time and super original, is that they actually went ahead to create the very first independent exhibitions. So now in hindsight, when we look at this all happening, we see here, this is the mark of the birth of modern art. So you literally see a new age starting. So cool. But, what was so different? What was so different about their way of creating art? What was so different about the way they painted and the way they created art? First of all, one of the most well-known things about Impressionism is that they painted outdoors, which can sound so simple. It's like painting outdoor, that was revolutionary. At the time, it really was, because during those times, the way painting was done was in studios. You had to be an academic painter and you had to work in the studio. But then you have these rebels say, no, we want to paint outside, the famous en plein air. We want to paint outside because all we want to do is to capture the natural light and the atmospheric effects in real time, what was really happening in real time. So it's a very Neptunian, because Neptune is nature. Neptune is that going outside and feeling like you have less restrictions, less limitations, that freedom of Aries. And it's like, doing what we want to do, following my desire, following my instinct. And what I want to do right now is paint outside. So that was super, super different and very, very disruptive. The other thing is that they wanted to paint, and they painted the simplicity of life. They wanted to paint everyday subjects. But, again, this, now in 2025, we might think, okay, but that's kind of a normal thing, right? How is that disruptive? Well, because at the time, what was perceived as good art was either religious, it had a religious theme, or a mythological theme, or it was a historical scene. And the Impressionists focus on ordinary, everyday people, landscapes, cafes, nature. It's like that beautiful lake and that, a little bit of the city life. And so all these moments that were at the time really overlooked in art. And even though it looked so, so, so beautiful and so pleasing and so soothing, but it was something very much less polished, less put together. It was less prepared. So in the studios, the artists, everything would be so staged, so posed. And here the impression is they're just painting what they're seeing. So there's something so authentic about it. When, Neptune and Aries, it's like things are not staged. You're seeing what's really happening in real time. So there's something that's very original, but in a very raw way. The other thing was that they captured fleeting moments. So it was so spontaneous, it was in the moment. And isn't that such an expression of Neptune and Aries? It's like be in the moment, follow the current. But with the Aries part of it, it's that sense of we gotta take action. We gotta do something different, which again was revolutionary. Not sitting in a studio, not having models, and that capturing that glimpse of a life, rather than something that's posed or staged, so it's very natural and very, very spontaneous. The other thing was the lack of harsh outlines. So the Impressionist paintings, if you look at them, you see, there's something that appears really soft and fluid. Very Neptunian words, right? Soft and fluid. So what they did is that instead of the black outlines, which was a traditional, technique of the time, they used color contrast. It was literally they invented a brand new technique. Again, Aries birthing something completely new. So that technique is what, when we look at these paintings, that's what gives those works this almost this dreamlike quality to them. Loose, invisible brush strokes. So traditional art aimed for something that was smooth and invisible. You're not supposed to see the brushwork. But these guys pay attention to these Aries words. They used quick, short, and fast. You know, that's how the way they painted. So unblended strokes to capture the light and the movement. Speaking of light, that was the focus. Impressionism focused on light, color, and movement rather than rigid form, which aligns very much with Neptune's dreamy and fluid nature, right? And it's that sense that things are not always clearly defined, so because, one of the reasons, like, I previously mentioned, is that instead of shading with black, they used pure colors, complementary hues, and that's what helped them create the shadows and the reflections. So again, revolutionary new way. No one was painting like this. And that's what made the paintings look so vibrant, made so dynamic rather than something too realistic, too stiff. They, of course, used a lot of pastels and hazy outlines, so really capturing that Neptune's like ethereal aesthetic. And that because that's their intention was to capture something that was almost like illusory moments, ephemeral kind of thing. And I cannot not mention Monet's impression, called Impression Sunrise. This was painting in 1872. It's iconic. And here you see this perfect example of this combination of Neptune and Aries because you see how things are not clearly defined. You know there's a sky, there's a sun, there is a lake or a body of water, but you see the light and the water merging into this almost this like soft and glowing vision. So we don't know, where does the water begin? Where does the sky begin and end? We don't really know. They like merge together. They become one thing. So there's no clear boundaries. That's very Neptunian, right? No boundaries. And, one fun fact about this painting was that when it was first exhibited, the art critics of the time, of course, didn't like it. And they actually, they call it, this one particular guy call it an impression of a painting. So it's like, oh, what a painting it kind of like the impression what a painting should look like. Really trying to say that it wasn't finished, and it wasn't good. It was really mocking it. But of course, these rebel artists, instead of like using this against them, they actually embraced the term and actually not only embraced it, but it stuck and it transcended time. Until now, it's well known and it's not going anywhere, right? So, one last thing here that I want to mention about this is that, remember I showed you the chart of Monet, right? I showed you Monet's chart, and I showed you how the Impressionist painters and artists, they were part of this generation of people born with Neptune in Aquarius. And together, they came together during, the times of Neptune and Aries, they came together and they created a new movement, right? But what happened to the artists who were born with Neptune and Aries? So I want to show you, a little, some of their works. So if you've heard of names like Matisse, Clint, Munch, Kandinsky, like these are the Neptune and Aries painters, and they ended up giving birth to a whole different movement called Fauvism, and Expressionism. So now you see the bold colors of Aries, right? You see the vibrant colors. It was all about spontaneous color, like explosions and expressive brushwork, very energetic. They're known for being the fastest painters, the fastest painters, the very Aries, like the rapid execution and very emotional. You see like in the screen, like the one in the middle, it's like this raw emotional and that they focused on. So what these painters did now, Aries, rebellious energy. Now the expressionists were rebelling against the impressionist movement. So now it's not about, bringing beauty and something soothing, but it's very much about this raw emotion. We want to do it something completely different. So instead of these pretty images of nature and the sky and the daily life, like now we want to paint pain, isolation, mental struggles. This is a time where, the industrial revolution is really changing the way cities are being, everything is being redefined and rebuilt. So there's a lot of changes. So you see the mental struggles, the emotional intensity. And a lot of these paintings, they reflect anxiety, fear, the struggles of modern life. So, even the human form is like twisted and exaggerated, so really it's to really heighten the expressiveness. So very like that, first of all, something very different from what came before, which is that Neptune and Aries, but also something that is really focusing on the emotions. It doesn't have to make sense. It's emotion over reality through the distorted forms and the colors. So really what they're trying to show is like that what's, the feelings and yeah, so everything it's very different from Impressionism. Now, as Neptune moves into Aries again, again, this is the first time since Impressionism was born. So what can we expect? What is the next great art revolution? Well, first of all, we can expect something brand new, new developments, new techniques. Maybe we're going to see the birth of a brand new art movement, something bold, something rebellious, something pioneering. So we can see a similar radical shift. But now we're going to bring in digital, immersive, AI driven, AI integrated, right? So of course, we're already seeing this, which is technology taking a really big role in the arts. So maybe it's going to be a lot of that blending digital with virtual world, with holographic world. So that blend, that bridging of reality and illusion, and really maybe blurring the lines, between what is what is real, what's fake? What am I even looking at? It can even get a little weird, right? In terms of museums, galleries, art installations, possibly a lot of the holographic interactive art installations really redefining galleries and museums. So museums can maybe shift from a passive observation to something that's very experimental and experiential and participatory. So, it's my experience, Aries, it's my experience of this artwork. So maybe stepping in inside a painting, interacting with AI generated art, exploring virtual galleries. So, for example, when we talk about Monet's paintings or a Monet exhibition, imagine being, as a visitor, instead of just looking at those beautiful paintings, we can actually go through some sort of a virtual experience where we go to the garden where he painted Giverny and we can be there, right? And we can see the changing light and the effects and the morning turning into afternoon, turning into night, so he can perceive what he was perceiving when he was painting it, the lights, the colors. So it's definitely possible. And how incredible would that be? So, and this can actually bring a lot of people to art because maybe for many people, art can be this almost like this boring experience where you're just kind of looking at things. But now you can actually get to participate in it. So it can really draw in a whole new crowd and people becoming more interested. And I think that could be really wonderful and really fun, right? Um, the other thing is experimental art, the same way that we saw Impressionism being such a disruptive art movement, we can see the same thing happening again because Aries is the warrior, Aries is the fighter. So maybe art as a form of protest, rebelling, that activism of Aries, and art as a tool for revolution. So we're probably going to see political and activist art, getting stronger, possibly tackling issues like, all sorts of global collective issues. That's Neptune. So climate change, identity issues, freedom of speech, freedom to really be who you are and express yourself fully and authentically. Rebellious art, provocative art, something raw, something authentic, and something that will challenge authority and break social norms. And I'm not just talking about the authority as in like the government, but what we perceive as art, what we perceive as good art. So, street art, graffiti, protest murals, they might be, more influential than ever before. And again, there can be these brand new ways of creating those things. It could be this recreation of things that we've already been, artistic ways that already been part of the human experience, but done in a brand new way. And because Aries is this rawness, authentic, primal energy. We can also see this some sort of a reaction against overly polished digital aesthetics. So the same way that we saw the Impressionists capturing this glimpse of life rather than something posed or something staged, there's something here that has to be very natural, very spontaneous. So we're going to see something, regarding that as well. The other thing is decentralization of art spaces. Remember how the Impressionists rejected the Academy and they held their own exhibitions? They're the first ones to do that. That had never been done before. So we can also see this wave of rebellious artists that may create all sorts of alternative spaces that, maybe will bypass the major galleries in favor of something that's more, pop art exhibitions or NFT galleries or definitely online virtual experiences. So instead of the big museums dominating the scenes or the big art galleries, we might see, a lot of these independent digital galleries and artist run spaces that could really challenge the hierarchy of the art world. Again, rebelling against traditional institutions. But very important here, and I want to kind of finish up with this thought because I think it's super important. One big thing about the Impressionist movement was artistic individualism. They focused on their personal vision and they did not compromise on what was important to them, what they wanted to create, how they wanted to create it. And it was unique and it had to be unique and authentic to them. So the same thing here is this potential of this brand new wave that's about to rise. And you don't have to be an artist. I mean, of course, if you are an artist, and there's so many ways of being an artist to begin with, it doesn't have to just be the traditional ways. Technology is a new form of artistic expression. And maybe it's bringing art into your business, but maybe bringing it's because ultimately it's creativity. So with this Neptune and Aries coming up for and staying for 14 years. This is such an invitation for all of us to connect and to really tune into our own artist within. Because if Neptune is where we are drawing inspiration from, where we there is this oneness of existence, right? These higher spheres of consciousness. So that's available to us. We can draw from that. We can tap, can tap in and receive this higher inspiration. But and you don't have to be a skilled artist, to create something unique during these times. Maybe it's drawing, maybe it's dancing, maybe it's AI, maybe it's collage, maybe it's something brand new that you haven't even experienced yet. But regardless of what it is, it's something that takes you away from time and you allow it to move through you. So, but it doesn't just move through you and it gets you excited and you're like, okay, this is wonderful, cool, awesome. No, it's more than that. Like we need to do the Aries part of this, which is do it, create it, take action, bring it to life. So it's this beautiful, awesome opportunity to dream something into existence, to really create something in this world. And I also think that artistic expression, art, creating in whatever way, shape, or form, it's such an antidote for the times we're living in. So, yeah, so this is a beautiful opportunity for all of us. Let's take advantage of it. Let's connect with this artist within in whatever way it comes and share it. That's the quality of distribution of Neptune, which is share it with the world. And maybe it's through social media, maybe it's with your friends, maybe it's in your family, maybe it's simply creating art with your kids. Like it doesn't have to be something huge. It just has to make you feel connected and excited and any way that you are really expressing your creative self. That's super important. So I hope you liked this. I hope this was fun and informative. And again, if you're interested in a more overview um, a general overview of this transit of Neptune and Aries, and make sure to check out my video called Neptune, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Link is below. And on that note, thank you. See you next time.